Any discussion of magic in Dungeons & Dragons eventually boils down to one word: annoying. Think about it. Depending on what type of magic user you are, and there are many to choose from in case you weren't aware, hadn't noticed, or somehow missed the memo over the last 6 episodes, you'll find yourself tracking multiple levels of spell slots. These slots are not something one understands intuitively. They're filled, by level, with a wide or narrow selection of spells from a specific spell list, depending on your particular type of magic user. These spells are sorted in several different categories, and you only get access to a few, again depending on just what sort of magic user you are. Not all of these spells are guaranteed to be useful at the same time, or even in the same adventure, or even at all ever. Oh, and every morning, you literally forget how everything works and have to start over relearning them. Or not, because sometimes you just remember them all the time. Or not, it depends, and that's just one edition of D&D. It can be different in earlier editions. And how do you get these spells? Well, you either wrote them down from someone else's spellbook, made a pact with some sort of cosmic horror, naturally know a few because you picked them off the magic tree like apples, or, and this is a favorite, you have the kind of voice that doesn't get you kicked out in the first couple of rounds at some Got Talent show where a very punchable man scowls at you the whole time. Or, instead of all that, you could just play a cleric. Really, just play a cleric. At least that makes some kind of sense. It's a confusing mishmash of related but utterly incomprehensible systems to anyone who hasn't been playing for at least a dozen years. And all of it is trying to emulate one tiny, simple little thing. You want to make someone stop hitting you without actually having to hit them yourself. Maybe you want them to hop off to the swamp, or blow up, or disappear, or dance themselves to death. Whatever the method, the end goal is the same. Please, stop hitting me. The first question to ask about all this malarkey is, whose dumb idea was this? And that, dear friends, is the big question. Who is responsible for spell slots, prepared spells, spell lists, and the whole gamut of related gobbledygook that ensures 4 hours into your Friday night session, your second-level wizard is staring down the maw of an ancient red dragon at the end of a long slog through a mountain-sized dungeon full of kobolds, and the only spell you can reliably cast is Make Water, which technically isn't even a spell, it just sort of happens. Blame Jack Vance. Well, Gary Gygax too, but mostly Jack Vance. Vancian magic, as it's called, is the reason for all of this. Inspired by the speculative fiction of Jack Vance's Dying Earth series, Gygax and his contemporaries adopted its concept of spells as finite, expendable resources that disappear from memory upon casting. This was novel, imaginative, and probably seemed like a great idea at the time. But now, it's a system that has baffled, frustrated, and annoyed players for decades. And yet, here we are, still using it, still grumbling, and still oddly charmed by its quirks. This is GM Word of the Week, and I'm Fiddleback. John Holbrook Jack Vance was born on August 28, 1916 in San Francisco, California. His early years were a blend of urban life and rural escapades, especially after his parents separated. Young Jack and his siblings moved to his grandfather's ranch near Oakley, nestled in the Sacramento River Delta. This rustic setting not only nurtured his love for the outdoors, but also provided ample time for him to indulge in reading, a pastime that would later fuel his prolific writing career. Vance graduated high school at the age of 15, not left, graduated, and his quest for knowledge led him to the University of California, Berkeley, where he dabbled in various disciplines, including mine engineering, physics, journalism, and English. However, the economic challenges of the Great Depression forced him to leave college and take on a series of eclectic jobs, from working as a bellhop to laboring in a cannery, and even on a gold dredge, Vance's early career was as varied as the worlds he would later create in his stories. World War II saw Vance serving in the Merchant Navy, which not only served to broaden his horizons but also provided a backdrop for his burgeoning writing aspirations. It was during this time that he penned his first story, The World Thinker, which found its way into the summer 1945 issue of Thrilling Wonder Stories. This marked the beginning of a writing career that would span over 6 decades. Vance's literary repertoire is vast and varied, but he is perhaps best known for his Dying Earth series. Set in a distant future where the sun is fading, this series introduced readers to a world teeming with magic, peculiar creatures, and intricate societies. His unique portrayal of magic in this series, where spells are memorized and forgotten upon casting, left an indelible mark on the fantasy genre. Magic in the Dying Earth is performed by memorizing syllables, and the human brain can only accommodate a certain number at once. When a spell is used, the syllables vanish from the caster's mind. Magic has loose links to the science of old, and advanced mathematics is treated like arcane lore. This concept, referred to as Vancian magic, was notably adopted by Gary Gygax in the creation of the Dungeons & Dragons role-playing game, cementing Vance's influence on modern fantasy gaming. But before we wander too far down the road of Jack Vancian celebration, let me interrupt myself to share an interesting tidbit I stumbled upon. The phrase Vancian magic, while undeniably descriptive of the man responsible for this peculiar brand of magical bookkeeping, doesn't do much to explain how the system actually works. To an outsider, or even an insider unaware the system had a name, Vancian magic might as well be a kind of specialized cleaning product. What you need is a name that gives you an immediate sense of how the system functions. And that name, my friends, is coupon magic. Coupon magic is a term used by gamers to describe magic systems in which spells and magical abilities feel like one-time use resources that must be carefully managed, like redeeming a coupon. The idea finds its roots in the wartime ration coupons, which limited access to scarce resources like eggs, gasoline, or sugar. Civilians received a booklet of these coupons from the government each month, and once their allotment was gone, that was it. No more eggs until next month. $6 a carton doesn't sound too bad, does it? Similarly, in coupon magic systems, spells were treated as expendable items. Once cast, they're gone until restocked, rather than being innate or limitless powers. This approach comes with its share of problems, not the least of which is a lack of immersion. Treating magic like a 1/30th of 1 cent value piece of discount-promising paper might help with game mechanics, but it feels strangely disconnected from the fantasy of being a wizard. Aren't magic users supposed to grow in power and mastery as they level up? Yet instead of feeling like an all-knowing archmage by level 10, you're still sweating over whether to use Fireball now or save it for later. And was memorizing Featherfall Last Rest really going to prove to be all that useful now that you've unexpectedly entered the Temple of Underwater Treasure Grinding? Or should we rest a whole day at the doorstep just so you can change spells? This limitation also makes magic users less versatile compared to their axe-wielding comrades, who can hack away at whatever they please as often as they like. Meanwhile, wizards are stuck hoarding spells, waiting for that perfect moment when the stars align, which they never quite do because, well, they brought the guy with the axe. And then there's the fun factor, or lack thereof. Constantly worrying about how many spells you have left and agonizing over when to use them doesn't exactly scream fantasy escapism. For many, it drains the joy out of pretending to be a spellcaster in the first place. The world already has a surplus of bookkeepers. Maybe you should have gone monk instead. That said, fans of coupon magic do exist, rare though they may be. They argue that the limited resources provide strategic depth, forcing players to think carefully about how and when to use their spells. Some genuinely enjoy the puzzle of resource management, and others defend it as a narrative device. They claim that limiting magic makes its use feel more meaningful and impactful, transforming spellcasting from a mundane action into a significant story-driving choice. And let's be honest, D&D players have a soft spot for tradition. For some, coupon magic persists not because it's the best system, but because it's the system. If it was good enough for Gygax, it's good enough for me. All of which sounds lovely, but let's cut through the flowery defenses. It's really all about game balance. And I know we don't often talk about game balance on this show, and with good reason, but here we are anyway. The real reason coupon magic endures is its ability to rein in spellcasters. Without limits, wizards and sorcerers and even warlocks could easily outshine other character classes, especially at higher levels, and basically take over the game, leaving the non-magic using characters standing on the sidelines. Imagine a world where your fighter friend, proudly swinging their +2 acts of cinematic beheading, watches helplessly as the party wizard casually bends reality with a flick of their wand so that the bad guys never existed in the first place. Every hour, on the hour. That's not game balance, that's a wizard dictatorship. By restricting how often magic users can cast their most powerful spells, coupon magic ensures that non-magical classes remain relevant. The fighter's steady output of attacks becomes just as important as the wizard's occasional moments of arcane brilliance. Look, Ma! I created water in his skull! Get a mop! Of course, balance doesn't come without its quirks. The system often feels like it punishes magic users for being, well, magical. It's frustrating to know that despite all your study, pact making, or natural ability, you can't use polymorph because you already cast greater invisibility earlier. Yet that frustration is also the price paid for fairness. Without some kind of limitation, magic users would dominate gameplay. So, while coupon magic may sometimes feel like a relic of gaming history or a bureaucratic exercise in spell rationing, it plays a crucial role in maintaining a delicate equilibrium between the classes. It's not perfect, but it ensures that every character, whether wielding a sword or a spellbook, gets a moment to shine. And really, isn't that the point? No, it is not. It's not the point at all. Because, and hold on to your little pointy hats here because this may blow your mind, there are different ways to do magic systems that are at least as well balanced as good old Vancian. Now, I know what you're thinking. Sacrilege, heresy, burn the non-believer. But bear with me because here's the thing. Magic, in its infinite wondrous forms, doesn't have to be constrained to a single method. In fact, one of the most fascinating aspects of tabletop role-playing games is the endless possibility for reinvention. Yet we so often cling to the spell slots and daily limits of coupon magic like it's carved in the stone tablets of gaming law, which, frankly, it is not. For starters, let's talk about mana systems. Many modern games like Exalted and even a few D&D variants, eschew spell slots entirely in favor of a pool of magical energy. Think of it as a rechargeable battery for spells. Big, flashy spells might drain half the battery in one go, while smaller cantrips barely make a dent. It's flexible, intuitive, and, dare I say, makes a whole lot more sense. You don't see Gandalf pausing mid-battle to mutter, "Ah, blast, I'm out of third-level spell slots. Guess I'll just sit this one out." No, he digs deep and pulls out another miracle because he's Gandalf, darn it! Then there's the skill-based systems like Call of Cthulhu or Blades in the Dark. In this approach, spells aren't limited by arbitrary resources but by your character's ability. Want to work the subtle magics of healing? Great, roll to see if you can pull it off. Higher level casters have better odds and can attempt more complex magic, while lower level mages might need to stick to simpler spells or risk catastrophic failure. Sure, it puts the wild in wild magic sometimes, but that's half the fun. And let's not forget freeform magic, the ultimate in creative chaos. In games like Mage the Ascension or Ryutama, there are no spell lists and no preordained mechanics. Instead, players describe what they want to do, and the game master decides how difficult it is and what resources, if any, it might require. It's immersive, unpredictable, and completely unshackled from the constraints of coupon clipping. Of course, it's also a nightmare for GMs who hate improvisation, but hey, nobody said wizardry was easy. So, why do we keep coming back to Vancian magic? Tradition, sure. Balance, maybe. But if we're being honest, it's also because it's safe. It's familiar. It's a system that works well enough, even if it's not particularly exciting. But the beauty of role-playing games lies in their adaptability. If you're tired of rationing spells like wartime sugar, nothing's stopping you from trying something new. And so, we come to the end of our series on magic. Our journey through the magical wilderness of Dungeons and Dragons has been nothing short of extraordinary. Over this series, we've wandered deep into the heart of magic, what it is, what it isn't, and why it's captivated adventurers and storytellers for decades. We've untangled misconceptions, unraveled histories, and uncovered the remarkable threads that bind magic to both our imagination and the game itself. We began by asking the big questions. What is magic, really? With a mix of curiosity and skepticism, we dismantled the popular myths and laid a foundation for understanding the essence of mystical energy in D&D. And from there, we took a leap into the fascinating history of magic, from ancient traditions and ritual practices to the interplay of science and mysticism through the ages. We explored how magic's evolution influenced the fantastical systems we know today, pausing along the way to meet iconic figures like Faust and to examine their impact on both real-world and D&D lore. No magical journey would be complete without diving into the tools of the trade. Spellbooks and potions all found their place in our discussions, alongside the peculiar quirks of gnomes and the strange but true tales of forbidden knowledge. We've pondered divine versus arcane power, traced the roots of mystical symbols, and even tackled the question of whether deals with devils are worth the price. Spoiler! It depends on your end game. Through all of this, we've not only explored how D&D uses magic to shape its worlds, but also revealed the human history, cultural stories, and timeless mysteries that make magic such a compelling force. This series wasn't just about spell slots and fireballs. It was about understanding the why behind the wonder. As we bring this arcane adventure to a close, we hope this series has inspired you to see the spark behind the spells. And now, after all that, we've done it. We've reached the end of our grand tour through all the main classes of D&D, from fighters, rangers, and rogues, through clerics, bards, and druids, and every spell-flinging, chant-muttering, divinely inspired, or curse-slinging character in between. You cannot deny it's been an adventure. Not the fireball-flinging, axe-chopping, trap-springing kind, but the kind that happens when you take a deep dive into something you love, uncovering layers of complexity, history, and creativity you might never have noticed otherwise. Thank you for listening to this episode of GM Word of the Week. I hope you found it entertaining and informative. This show began shortly after the release of the 5th edition of Dungeons & Dragons, and it feels fitting that it should end as a new version of the game begins to emerge. So here we are, the final episode of GM Word of the Week. Over the years, we've had the privilege of getting to know so many of you. Some of you have shown your support through kind words and encouragement, others through financial contributions, and all of you by simply being part of this journey. For all of that, thank you. Many of you have shared how much the show has meant to you, how it's sparked your imagination, deepened your games, and occasionally made you laugh. I know I speak for both Scott and myself when I say those moments, those messages, meant the most to us. Your appreciation, your insights, and your enthusiasm for what we've created have been invaluable. We, the creators of GM Word of the Week, deeply appreciate each and every one of you who have listened, supported, and joined us on this adventure. But don't be sad. Be glad. Look at the time we've had together. Hundreds of episodes spanning topics far and wide, from the esoteric to the absurd, all designed to enrich your games and inspire your creativity. And the best part? Those episodes aren't going anywhere. You can still find all 300 plus archived episodes scattered across the internet, ready to be revisited whenever you'd like. YouTube has them, and so does archive.org if you know where to look. The knowledge, the inspiration, and even the bad jokes will remain, waiting to be shared with your friends, your gaming groups, and even your kids someday. And while GM Word of the Week is concluding, I'm not disappearing, not yet anyway. There's still more to create, more to explore, and more ideas to tinker with. Warhogs is well on its way to alpha testing, and another new game, Fire, is coming soon. Playtests for both will be available to our supporters on Buy Me a Coffee, so if you want to stay connected or get involved, there's still plenty to look forward to. So, don't be a stranger out there, or don't be any stranger out there. Stay in touch, stay creative, and keep the spirit of discovery and imagination alive in your games. Thank you for everything. It's been a kind of magic, hasn't it? This episode is a Fiddleback production and was researched, written, and produced by Brian Casey. Find more episodes at gmwordoftheweek.com. History never really says goodbye. History says, see you later.